This is the Sigma 50mm F1.2 DGDN Art, and it is a brand new lens from Sigma, and really I would say a direct competitor to the Sony GM 50mm F1.2. But in true Sigma fashion, this lens is less expensive than the Sony, a little bit lighter than the Sony, and optically should be pretty brilliant. But let's see how it is. Let's check it out in this video. Packaging is a standard affair. This lens comes in a white box, user manual, lens hood, and a zippered travel pouch. Plastic front and rear lens caps, and there you have it. This 50mm f1.2 is the brightest 50mm that Sigma has in its lineup, but interestingly, they focused on making this small and light, and I'll get this out of the way immediately. It is 40 grams lighter than the Sony according to my scale, which isn't much, but this does make the Sigma, quote, the lightest 50mm f1.2 in its class, end quote. But it's still a heavy lens. It feels premium though. Honestly, the finishes feel higher level than those on the 50mm GM. That being said, a marginal weight or size reduction is really not a reason to go out and sell your GM to get this art. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronic connections, and interestingly, this rounded rear cutout that sits nearly flush to the back of the lens. It's the first that I've seen a lens designed this way. There is a gasket around the mount, and the entire lens is also dust and splash resistant in design. 024 etched here indicates a 2024 release, minimum focus of 0.4 meters, and made in Japan. Aperture ring is next, and it's typical art level quality, smooth, clicky, or declick depending on where you have this switch, moving from f1.2 to f16, and then a larger click into auto aperture. Above this ring is a switch that locks you into or out of that auto aperture, a Sigma logo, lens specs, A for art logo here, and a few switches. Autofocus manual focus switch, AFL or autofocus lock button, and that click on and off switch. The focus ring is nice and smooth, rubberized and grippy, but electronic, so it does spin infinitely in either direction. Around the front, there is a concave front lens element and nothing else, no writing or specs, it's a clean front end. Inside, there are a whopping 17 elements in 12 groups, Sigma's HLA or high response linear actuator autofocus motor, and a 13-blade rounded diaphragm, which is notably 2 more blades than what you get with the Sony GM. Mounted on my A7C, it looks great. I've always liked the design of Sigma's art lineup, which I think is only beaten by their own I-series lineup, but that's just my opinion. It is a heavy lens, lighter than the GM, but it's still almost 2 pounds of metal, plastic, and glass. If you are looking for a 50mm prime lens, and based on the numbers, I think a lot of people are, because I've said this in the past, I think that 50mm on a full frame is still the most popular prime lens focal length of all time. This is really the ultimate 50mm f1.2 that you can get, because it is f1.2. Now you can get faster than f1.2, but usually those are manual lenses, and optically they are not clinically sharp. So between this and the GM, I think you have 2 of the best super fast 50mm options. So I'm expecting this lens to perform well. Let's see how it did straight out of my camera, A7C, so it's an older camera body, unedited, unprocessed, untouched photos, ready, set, go. Alright, so I would describe that as not disappointing performance out of this Sigma. I would probably say that's some of the sharpest, shallowest depth of field portraits that I've ever shot. In terms of sharpness, there's not much to discuss. The images are tack sharp in the center, and when the corners aren't full to the brim with bokeh, they are also remarkably sharp. Colors are punchy, contrast is excellent. In terms of distortion, chromatic aberration has been dealt with very well. Can you see some? Yes, but it's very well controlled for being wide open at f1.2. Vignetting is also not an issue, neither is barrel or pincushion distortion. Now let's talk about bokeh, because that is a primary reason people will be buying this lens. It's smooth, very smooth. Bokeh balls are large and circular in the center, and they do cat-eye into the corners and edges. If you look at them up close, they are nice in consistency, no onion ringing, no outlines, no fringing. And I never found the bokeh to be distracting either. It's a spectacular performance. In terms of autofocus, I found this lens to be snappy, accurate, and silent. Even for video work wide open at f1.2, I was impressed with its tracking abilities and speed, and this is on an old A7C camera body. I'd imagine it would perform even better on a newer Sony body. Focus breathing is another area Sigma tried to do some magic in, and I don't know how they do it, but this lens has almost no perceptible focus breathing. This is without any in-camera focus breathing compensation trickery. And then we get to the price, which is $1,400 US, making it $500 less expensive than the Sony, which is a lot. And really, this is what Sigma does so well, is they produce high quality, very sharp, excellent built lenses, and then they sell them for a fraction of what Sony charges for the exact same thing. Now, I've played with the Sony 50mm f1.2, but I've never actually reviewed it for an extended period of time. But if it was my money, and just based on my little experience with the Sony and my longer experience with this lens, I would pick this one up and use the extra $500 to go out and shop for groceries. I don't know. At $1,400, this f1.2 Sigma is priced similarly to Sony's 50mm f1.4 GM, which is another great lens. But if you want the most bokeh and the best low light performance, the f1.2 does excel in that. Now, if you are shooting with the A9 III or A1 and want absolute tracking at 30 frames per second, the Sony lenses will have an edge. But for portraits, for weddings, for casual shoots, I don't think you'll see a practical difference between the autofocus performance of something like a GM and this art. And so if you are looking for a 50mm lens, this one is hard to beat if you're looking for the ultimate 50mm lens, because if you really don't need f1.2, you can go out and buy the Sigma 50mm f1.4 art, which is also optically brilliant, and that lens is $850, so $550 less expensive than this one. For me, I've always maintained that Sigma makes some of the best lenses for Sony cameras, and the fact that they are made in Japan and each one undergoes MTF measuring, and the fact that I've never heard of a manufacturing defect are all positives that keep me coming back. Beyond the excellent optics, these lenses are well designed, and they hold their value remarkably well in the secondary market. These are tools at the end of the day, but I do think that Sigma makes some of the best optical tools out on the market. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.